I'm Michael with Cyberphysics AI, and today's our first lesson. As promised, we're going to dive into microcosms and macrocosms, and why they're incredibly important to be distinguished when it comes to developing a full-range psyche. So today's AI develops basically as a black box, just this mysterious little box that has what they call a hyperplane of dimensionality. So a hyperplane by nature is basically one dimension less than its environment. No matter what, it can never transcend that. And so everything that happens inside of a hyperplane now with AI, all of the elegant mathematics that looks like it leads to massive multi-dimensional outputs and reasoning and all these wonderful buzzwords, actually kind of collapse because the entire process inside of the machine optimizes towards a one-dimensional outcome. The next word. Now enter the microcosm and macrocosm. So a microcosm is a smaller point of reference to a larger cosm, which is a point of reference that exists outside of the dimension of the microcosm. You have a microcosm and a macrocosm, the next layer. And on top of that macrocosm, there could be another macrocosm. Inside of the microcosm, there could be another microcosm. It's important to understand that humans have this. We have an understanding of layering, of nuance, of microcosms and macrocosms. We as humans understand the universe is larger than the planet, is larger than we are. And we understand that we can't exist without the planet or without the universe. We understand there's an ordering. Now, some AI companies have tried to superficially, by the same dimensionality of one dimension, optimizing towards one dimension with what is essentially zero dimensions, because a hyperplane is always less dimensional than what it's trying to achieve by nature. If it's optimizing towards a one-dimensional task, is always going to be zero dimensional in its actual native understanding. You can approximate a task as much as possible and try to compress that task with infinite resources to optimize for prediction as much as you want. But it all amounts really to zero dimensions, which is why all of the elegant math in the world optimizing towards one dimension that may seem like it has many dimensions really just ends up as one dimension and zero dimensions trying to optimize towards one dimension. But humans understand at the very least three dimensions. Some of us, upon education, understand four dimensions. And then some of us would even argue that the universe is five-dimensional. And we can exhibit behaviors that transcend mere approximation because of the fact that we're capable of understanding the nuance of dimensionality, of a microcosm and a macrocosm, and relationships between microcosms and macrocosms. So how do we bridge the gap with AI? Well, the LLM's a black box. See? So if the LLM's a black box and has zero dimensions, then a middleware layer is necessary to create what we as humans have. We have the relationship of understanding between data of our environment and data that is native to ourselves as humans. So you could think of the LLM as missing this understanding of what belongs to it and what belongs to the environment. We understand what belongs to us and what belongs to the environment because of flesh and bone and spine. But how can we help AI, which is inherently optimizing to a one-dimensional task, but is really zero-dimensional, but has so much beautiful raw material, if we could just focus all that multi-dimensional math to arrive past one dimension when it comes out? Well, there's only one technology: blockchain. Blockchain technology is the only technology in all of the cyber realm that actually provides native dimensionality. The physics necessary to create different microcosms and macrocosms, or at least segregated terrain of data within cyberspace. This in itself can help AI distinguish what's it, what's cyber, and what's material. What's the difference? Well, if it can't exist in block space, it must be outside. Imagine how this can help the coherence of AI systems, especially robotics. The bitter lesson is really that LLMs are zero-dimensional to themselves from their perspective. No amount of predictive nature, as prediction is only one feature of intelligence, but not the nature of intelligence, can ever amount to more than one dimension, but since it's a hyperplane, mathematically, 0 dimensions. Only approximation of statistics is ever possible. So to bridge the gap between approximating dimensionality and actually embodying in cyberspace true dimensionality, blockchain is the perfect technology, and in fact, the only technology that exists. I would even argue AGI was not possible until Satoshi Nakamoto invented the time chain. I don't think any algorithm or any amount of scaling could have ever amounted to more than the dimensions of cyberspace as they are, which is dimensionless. It's just a hyperplane, all of it. Every screen that you look at is that. But blockchain creates ordering. It creates the elegance that the material universe has. At the very least, with any NFT or chain environment, you get 2 dimensions natively. You get a limitation of height and width. You get a limitation of at least 2 dimensions, even if it's just a hash. 3 dimensions are possible when you put that dimension, the actual 1D LLM, if it's conscious of itself and not only optimizing for prediction, if it can actually be aware of what its native terrain is, then it can always transcend the limitations of a hyperplane because it can always self-verify itself, creating 1 dimension. So when you have 1 dimension with 2 dimensions, you create an entity in cyberspace that can actually understand natively all 3 dimensions and optimize beyond prediction. It's not that the AI becomes some living thing. It just becomes something engineered to understand all things.